Hey, welcome to Bifocal. Today is part of our business series, and we're going to be talking about various considerations we got to go through in setting up a remote workforce. Stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. Today, we're in the middle of the coronavirus, and one of the big topics right now is this mandatory work from home. And I thought it would be interesting to talk today about what all is involved in setting up a remote workforce. And today, I have Stephan, Director of CRM and Technology for Concept. And Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And I thought it would be interesting because you recently went through this and kind of at the 11th hour type thing. And I thought it'd be interesting to kind of walk through a little bit of that.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, prior to what we've just gone through with the virus, you've been managing a remote workforce.
Correct.
Yeah. But tell me a little bit about like that size, what you've been managing.
Sure. So if we look back a few years, we started conversations about setting up a remote workforce probably back in 2018. And, we began really with just a small pilot group, which was our CRM team. And we started that pilot for about 90 days. And with that, what we were really trying to determine is, number one, is it viable? Two, will our employees be more productive? Will they have a better work-life balance working from home, just eliminating some of the stressors that they would have actually coming into the office to essentially, produce some better and more quality work? So we started with that 3-month program. We did it for 1 day a week, and it was pretty simple for us to manage and track that. Since we are a consulting firm, all of our time is logged, whether it's billable or non-billable. So it was a matter of me simply pulling some reports to see when the employees were working from home during that pilot program and how productive they were versus when employees were actually in the office and how productive they were. And not to my surprise, we showed about 20% increase in productivity.
Oh, really?
So, fast forward a few months, we decided to, roll it out to the whole CRM group, and they were allowed to essentially work remotely full time, and we've been doing that.
Anybody argue with you?
No, not at all.
They were all on board?
They were all on board. No one had any issues with it. It was nice. Most of the folks are local here, with exception of one person who's in Houston. But, they had an office that they can come into, and they have a workspace here that they can come to at any time. And we still set up team lunches and team meetings and communicate frequently through Microsoft Teams to make sure we're staying in close contact and communication. But I didn't receive any pushback on that.
Yeah, I'm sure. But now fast forward 2 years later, right? Year and a half or whatever, you kind of had a little bit of a different task ahead of you.
I did. Yeah.
We Concept kind of got the mandate that, or we assumed it was going to happen.
Right.
Right. And we got ahead of that. And what were some of those big considerations when you knew you were going to have to move this workforce remote? Because this wasn't, all CRM people who,
sure.
And let's be honest, those type of people, they're kind of used to working from home.
Right.
That's a very, that position lends itself. Mm-hmm. But the major roles and functionality you were moving home now, not necessarily the case.
Right. And, I think the biggest considerations that we had in doing that were, number one, our CRM group, they all have mobile solutions. So they all have laptops, they have cell phones, they can take those wherever they are. And, they're used to working in that type of environment, as you mentioned.
They're technology people.
Correct. So, if they needed some technical assistance, oftentimes they're probably taking care of it themselves before they contact the IT department, unless it's something that they simply can't figure out.
Yeah.
On the operations side, we have a wide range of folks who are tech savvy. Some are very, very familiar with how to set up a computer.
What was the bulk of the people you had to get in a remote environment? Like what types of positions, what all they range from?
Sure. So it was primarily our business development managers, our production managers, our account executives, our HR group, our office admin, essentially the entire company. I would say the majority of the employees were business development managers in our production group. So they're primarily the ones who are on the phones, making the phone calls, generating leads, and our production managers essentially are overseeing those business development folks, and, they're ensuring the quality of leads, coaching them, working with them, knowing where to target and develop those.
So where
leads.
do you start?
Yeah, so that was kind of the big question, right?
Did you have a deadline? Like when you got started, did you know I have to be done at this date?
We really didn't, but we knew we were up against a clock, right?
You knew a deadline was coming.
We had a pretty strong feeling. I think, we started this the first week of March, and I believe we were primarily following CDC recommendations, primarily following the, Mike DeWine and Ohio governor's recommendations in terms of how many people you can have in a building. But I think once the schools started to shut down, that was a pretty big wake-up call where we said, okay, there are a lot of folks who have kids here. They're probably going to be staying home with their children. We're starting to see some other cities shut down. Other countries have been shutting down. We knew it was probably coming, so we wanted to be a little bit more proactive and get a solution in place before that mandate came down. And thankfully, we were able to get up and running before that happened this week.
What was one of the biggest things you had to get in place before you could even start? Like you mentioned some technology, like walk me through some of that.
Yeah, so the first thing that we had to consider was, was our staff equipped to be able to work remotely? I needed to make sure that first and foremost, everyone had a viable internet connection that would allow them to do their day-to-day tasks.
How'd you figure that out?
So we actually sent out a survey. So we used our Paycom system, which is our human capital management tool, and we sent out a survey to all the employees. We asked them a series of questions. Do you have a quiet work environment that you'd be able to work remotely? Do you currently have internet? If you do have internet, here are some instructions on how to run a speed test. Please report those results back.
So you actually had people report back those numbers?
Yeah, within a day. I think everyone was pretty excited when they saw that survey come through. So we got our responses back very quickly.
Okay. So what other things did you have to
consider? I think security was probably one of the biggest things. We currently manage everything internally. I'd say, we have a pretty wide variety from a technical perspective, our tech stack. We have a lot of solutions that are currently managed in the cloud, but we also have some solutions that are managed internally on our servers here at Concept. So my biggest concern was really the security of our data, our customers' data, and of course the security of the devices themselves.
Walk me through a little bit of that, because I don't know, if everyone will understand this. Mm-hmm. You mentioned our customers' data.
Sure.
We weren't just managing our own data through this process.
Correct. Yep. So we manage our customers' data through our sales development projects. We do not share data across the board. What we do when we typically kick off a new project is we procure data for our customers, or if they have existing data that they would like to use for that program, they would essentially provide it to us. And then we would set up a project for them either in our instance of Salesforce, or we'd set it up directly in their CRM. And then we put certain security restrictions in place to ensure that the business development manager only has access to that data set. That's the data set that they're currently working, and we make adjustments as needed. So you are correct. I mean, we're managing our customers' information as well as Concept.
So what kind of complexity did that add for you?
Well, a pretty large complexity. I think, we have certain restrictions here at Concept where folks can't log into Salesforce or CRM outside of our IP address. The same applies on our Paycom system. We have certain NDAs that are currently in place as well with our customers. That's always been a top priority for us to make sure that we have that locked down as much as possible. So going out into the outside world and having folks accessing that data on their own PCs, from their home environments, it's not really in a controlled environment anymore. We can't make sure that people are locking their computers when they're walking away, and people really hadn't been trained on how to do that when working remotely.
So how do you address it?
Yeah, so we put a couple different things in place. First and foremost, we had to, as we rolled this out, we had to remove the restrictions to allow folks to log in. We went through all of our non-disclosures. We made sure our customers were aware of the change, so that, if they had any concerns as well, that they would bring that to our attention. And we took it a step further. We actually implemented a solution called Workspace ONE that's owned by VMware. Now, thankfully, this is a program that I've been evaluating since January. As I've had my CRM team working remotely over the past 12 months, I've identified a few different areas that we can improve upon, a few holes that we could potentially close up in the event that we were to scale this up to a larger group. And those discussions started probably late last year. I know there were folks on the management team as well as in the operations group who had been asking for that. And the plan was to really evaluate it in Q2 or Q3 this year, but the coronavirus really just fast-tracked that timeline. So thankfully, I'd already been evaluating this solution. And, it was actually March 5th or 6th, I had a pricing discussion with one of our partners, Vox Mobile, and they had presented pricing to me about the solution. And that following Monday, I received an email from the president of the company and said, Joe, how difficult would it be to move our entire workforce to work remotely?
So you had a technology pretty well vetted out.
Yes.
You were comfortable.
Correct. I was comfortable. I'd already documented some of the restrictions that we were going to put in place, some of the policies and procedures we were going to put in place with this particular solution. So I'd already had a lot of those.
What if you wouldn't have? We
probably wouldn't have been able to roll this out as quickly as we did.
I'm assuming there's a lot of companies out there that found themselves like that.
Absolutely. And I think, the companies that were, waited till the 11th hour and were forced to do it, they may still have some security holes in their processes.
Well, that was probably a godsend. You were ahead of that because we weren't the type of company that really had a plan to send our entire workforce home.
Right.
That was never really in our plan to do that.
Right.
So if we would have been behind the eight ball on that could have been pretty devastating.
Absolutely.
So you had this software, you had it kind of vetted out.
Mm-hmm.
You get the call from the president, says, hey, we got to do this. Where did you go from there?
Yeah, so I responded back and I said, we have a lot of the building blocks currently in place to do this. We've tested it with a small group of folks. I know it's a different job function. I said, I'd feel a lot more comfortable if we purchased a solution right now from a security perspective.
So there was an expense we had to incur.
There was. It was a pretty hefty expense. However, the company did not drag their feet at all. I believe it was within 2 days I received budget approval to sign off on that. And, I did everything that I could in working with Vox Mobile to make sure that we at least had the bare bones solution up and running as quickly as we possibly could.
So you had a partner.
Yep.
That was helping you along the way.
Yes. Yeah. Vox Mobile is a reseller of the solution and a few others. So we evaluated a couple different platforms. And I know when we made the final call and said, hey, we're going to start sending some groups home, I called them right away and I said, hey, I'm going to need your help with this. I need you to get me in the queue. We need to get at least the bare bones set up as soon as possible. And they were very accommodating to do that.
Yeah. So you're moving forward now. At what point did you say, I think I have a good enough understanding that I can send some people home?
Yeah, so it was probably about 2 or 3 days after getting the solution signed off on, starting to actually implement some of the solution. It was probably about 2 or 3 days later, I said, I think we're ready to start sending some groups of people home.
And I'm assuming, you and I are only talking about the technical side of this.
Right.
There's all the operational side, right?
Absolutely.
Now I'm assuming there's people on the back side of this. They're trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to manage these people now at home?
Right.
Were you involved in any of those meetings, conversations?
I was. Our leadership team all came together, and we had quite a few conversations to determine what the production group is going to need, what HR is going to need, what the president's going to need, what we're going to need from a technical perspective.
Walk me through, what was kind of that climate of those meetings? Because you got people from, you just mentioned, you got accounting, you got HR, you got operations, sales.
Right.
I mean, you got all kinds of different departments. You got the tech. What was that climate like? Were some people like, oh man? Were some like, yep, let's give this? What was that like?
Yeah, I think nobody really panicked during this. I think everyone really came together, and we all had a very good working relationship. I think that everyone realized the top priority was making sure the technical components were in place and the operations group was able to function. All of the other things were, I don't want to say pushed aside, but they weren't as top priority. So, between myself and our director of production, we really drove a lot of those conversations, and everyone was on board with the suggestions and input that
you were
folks
kind of
were
leading the pack on that.
Between myself,
technology really had.
Between myself, our director of production, and the president of the company, I would say, the three of us working together really led the charge on this.
Yeah, and you pulled that together. You said probably in 3 days. I mean, we talked about you had a solution. I mean, so you had that vetted out. But by the time you got to go ahead from the president, was it mandated yet? Did we know that we were going to have to go to a remote, or are we still kind of thinking we probably will?
Yeah, it wasn't mandated by the governor yet. We saw some cities starting to shut down at that point, and the CDC recommendation went from groups of 100 down to 50, and I think when they went to 10, we had started when they had made the recommendation of 50 people or less. That was day one. That was Monday, where we sent the first group of people home.
So you were a little bit ahead of it.
A little bit ahead of it, yep.
So how did you, when you sent that first group home, walk me through a little bit of, like, how did all that happen? How did you, what was the criteria in deciding who, and how did you educate those people and all of that?
Yep. There were a number of different factors that we looked at in terms of what groups we were going to send home first. I think number one, our top priority was the health and safety of our employees. So, we looked at folks who were maybe, a little bit more susceptible to be exposed to the virus and have some serious health concerns. We also looked at our largest customers and what projects were, number one, top priority for us to ensure that we were continuing to service them.
Now, when you say that, is that coming from the vein of, let's make sure we can handle these big customers?
Yes. Yeah, let's make
sure. Teams of people on them.
Correct. Yeah, we have teams of people on them, but we wanted to make sure that we had no lapse in production for our largest
So did you just send like 1 or 2 people from that particular team just to get a sampling?
Yes, that's exactly what we did for the first group of folks. We didn't send the whole team home that was working on that particular project for that customer, but a small sampling. And, we also looked at our highest producers, right? I believe that was one of the factors that we took into consideration as well for the first group that we sent home.
So I'm assuming in this first group, and probably every group to follow, you have some people that they can go home, plug their PC in, and they're up and running, probably no problem.
Right.
All the way to the other end of the spectrum of, hey, where's this cable go? Where's that one go?
Yes.
How did you educate those people?
Sure. So I would say, that the week of March 9th, once the president of the company had sent over that email, I instructed my team immediately to start putting together some process documentations, and we even recorded a video to show folks how to plug your computer in. Now, we didn't have the luxury of having laptops for everyone to send them home with, so we did send them home with their desktops. So it was a little bit more complicated than just turning a computer on. They had to plug their monitors in, their keyboards, or mice, etc.
But you made a video. How could they watch the video if they didn't have their PC in?
Well, so we sent it to them, and most of them have access to it on their email. If for whatever reason they couldn't access it, on their mobile devices, for whatever reason, if they couldn't access it, then we would find a way to make sure that they were able to view it.
So inside the company, decisions made, we're going remote. I got a first group, a sampling group.
Yep.
Did you pull them all together internally as well? And what were the marching orders when you sent them home?
Yeah, we did. So the president of the company stayed in close communication with the whole organization, just letting them know what was going on, what the updates were. So what we did was, an hour before we sent that group home, we pulled them all together in our training center. And between myself and our director of production, we walked them through. We spent about 30 minutes with them explaining what this whole process looks like from start to finish. We educated them in terms of what's expected of you. When you do get home and get set up, here's what we're looking for you to do. We sent them all some follow-up email and communication as well, just making sure that we were staying on top of our priorities, which again was the safety of the employees, safety of our data, safety of the equipment itself.
What were some of the questions you got?
Yeah, thinking back now, there were some questions. Is it a flexible work schedule? Some of these employees are hourly, so the answer to that was no.
Some are working West Coast.
Right. Some are working West Coast. So, normal work hours would apply if you're typically scheduled to work from 8 to 5, or if you're scheduled to work from 9 to 8, or whatever the case may be. Normal work hours would apply. I know some questions have come up about what's an acceptable internet speed for me to have at home in order to do my job properly.
Yeah, you mentioned you sent that survey out.
Yeah.
Did any come back that it just wasn't equipped? So how did you address that?
Yeah, so we had a few folks. There was one individual who just didn't have internet at all, and essentially we had that discussion and said, hey, in order to work remotely, you have to have an internet connection. They said, I would like to work remotely, so they went out and called Spectrum that day and had it set up pretty quick. For the folks that had some questionable internet speeds, essentially what we recommended to them was there are a few things that you can do to bump your speed up. If you're on a wireless network, you could hardwire directly into your router, try to minimize the traffic that's on your network during the day. If your kids are home playing Xbox or watching Netflix, things like that. Yeah. At the end of the day, you don't need a super powerful network in order to make calls, right? I believe the recommendation is somewhere in the 3 megabytes, up and down speed in order just to make phone calls. However, we addressed those issues. We provided some recommendations. And then what we did after we rolled this out was we had everyone send us some additional quality tests back. So we looked at things like their jitter, their latency, what their upload and download speed looked like.
So you were monitoring a lot of stuff on the back end.
We were, yeah. So we were receiving those statistics back and keeping track of all of that in a nice organized Excel file. And for the folks that were borderline, what we're doing is really just calling them throughout the week and just doing some quality checks on their network speeds. And, for the most part, we really haven't had any substantial issues. I believe we ran into one where it was very choppy. And again, we made the recommendation, get off your Wi-Fi network, try to plug directly in. And that actually helped quite a bit. They were just too far from where their wireless router was. You
mentioned a little earlier that a lot of our software and the software you were dealing with was a lot of cloud-based.
Yes.
How important was that in this process?
Pretty important, actually. Our folks really didn't need to access any of the internal resources that we have here at Concept, everything being managed up in the cloud from our phone system, which is Nextiva, Salesforce, HubSpot, our HR management solution.
So these folks, they're not taking phones home.
Right. Yep.
That's big.
Correct. Yeah. No one took any hard phones home with them. Everyone has a soft phone on their computer, so all of their phone calls are running right through the internet. We leveraged the Office 365 suite, which is also managed up in the cloud now as well. And we're using a lot of different solutions within that tool, both for collaboration through Microsoft Teams. We're now using Microsoft Streams, so we're sending out daily videos to our employees as well, just giving them company updates. And the obvious Outlook, Excel, Word, PowerPoint. We're also leveraging SharePoint. So that's one area that was a little bit of a process change for our employees. We have a file server internally where most folks would go to access customer documents or employee documents, things like that. We've had SharePoint set up for a while. It was just never fully adopted, so we really just had to rip the Band-Aid off. We put, our director of production created a learning management module. He put it in our Paycom system, which is our HR system, so that people can go and access it to know how to access SharePoint, and we help support that group when they got home as well.
It's interesting. You mentioned a couple times now that you've created some videos. So this whole coronavirus, remote workforce, get it done now, that's caused a lot of changes internally, just from day-to-day stuff.
Yes, yeah, it has. And some of the reporting that we're generating and how we're communicating to our staff now, we're not really having face-to-face discussions. It's more of communicating on Microsoft Teams, sending, process documentation and learning management videos through our LMS platform. And so it's
so the whole operations group is learning how to more differently collaborate.
Correct.
And all of that.
Yes.
Isn't it amazing how one change, and not to minimize the coronavirus, but I mean, that change, all the downstream effects that one change causes?
Absolutely. And it was very quick how it happened.
Yeah. You were mentioning about you rolled out this first group. Mm-hmm. It's not like you had 30 days to get a bunch of data points.
No, we didn't.
So how'd all that transpire?
Yeah, it actually went surprisingly smooth. I was anticipating one of the biggest concerns that I had with this was, we have a smaller IT staff here. How are we going to support and manage this for this large of a group? And we're sending home essentially about 100 employees. And that was probably my biggest concern, but to my surprise, with the first group and the rest of the groups, we really didn't have a lot of technical hurdles that we had to overcome with them. Everybody really pulled together. They worked together. They communicated well. The expectation was, once you leave the building, you pack up your things, make sure you take care of the equipment, make sure it's properly stored in your car as you're delivering it to your house, lay it out on your table, set it up. Once you're up and running, the expectation is to send us over an email so we can check you off the list, know that you're up and operational, send us over your speed and your quality tests, and get back to work.
Sounds like you had it pretty well outlined for everybody, though. I mean, almost like a checklist type thing. Here's what you need to do day one, or minute 1, minute 2, minute 3, and here's where you should end up.
Yep. I think the first group was a little bit of a rough draft, and we learned from that and rolling out groups 2, 3, and 4.
So from the time you rolled group 1,
yep,
how much time elapsed till you got to the final group?
So 2 days, actually. So the first group was Monday, and fourth group was Wednesday at 4 o'clock.
So from Monday to Wednesday, you rolled out roughly 100 people.
Correct. Yeah, we didn't plan on doing it that quick.
Yeah.
The first group, the intention was to let them work from home for at least a few days, gather some feedback.
You didn't have the luxury.
We didn't have the luxury. As the recommendations were coming down from the governor and from the CDC, we decided that we have to make this change now, and we just have to start rolling these additional groups out.
How has your role changed now, just in the past week or so that you have this remote workforce? How has some of that changed for you?
Honestly, I really haven't seen a lot of change in my particular job function. There's been a lot more dealing with cases for our employees and just making sure that their technical equipment is all set up and functioning properly. So far this week, it's been pretty minimal. Everyone is comfortable. Everyone's, working just fine, very minor issues. So we saw a little bit of an uptick in that. I think our IT specialist, who handles a lot more of the day-to-day, probably saw a little bit more in her job function, changing, where she wasn't really working with folks face-to-face, and she was trying to figure out different solutions. And the same for me, just trying to figure out different solutions and how we can solve these issues.
Yeah, she's combing the floor.
Right.
Now do you have some type of a service ticket system set up?
Yep.
How's all that being handled now?
Sure. So we do have a service ticket system set up through Salesforce. You can email IT support at Concept, and that'll shoot us over a direct support ticket. They all have our direct lines. So myself and our IT specialist are readily available. So if they call our direct lines, we're there to help them as well. They can email us directly. We're typically pretty strict on process and how IT tickets come in. I think we opened up the floodgates a bit, for this process, and said, just call me on my cell, call me, after hours if needed, send me an email direct, and, we'll assist you to make sure you're up and running.
Are you seeing any trends as far as like types of questions you're getting?
I think the biggest things were we had a lot of folks who didn't have or weren't set up in close proximity to their router. So some folks went out and actually purchased some wireless dongles so that they can actually connect to the internet wirelessly. We saw quite a few support tickets come in for that. Some people needing some assistance to actually get the program set up and situated on their computer and then actually connect to the internet. Other than that, it's been a lot of the very similar IT issues that we've seen, while we're here in the office. Password resets, I'm having trouble accessing a certain program, or, something's failing on my computer. We need to address it quickly.
So you're not really seeing any major spikes that are directly related to this deployment of a remote workforce?
Not a large number. I think that
that's pretty positive.
It is. It's very positive. It's it goes to the true testament. Everyone paid close attention during those briefings. Everyone reviewed the process documents. Everyone did what they were supposed to when they got home to get set up and to make sure that they were functioning properly. We had our share of issues. I mean, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't a substantial spike in technical support.
When you knew you were going to have to move forward, what was your biggest concern?
I think the biggest concern was probably, again, is everybody equipped to be able to do this? And second, and this was prior to us having Workspace ONE really configured and situated, was more or less the security and management of the devices from one central location. Once I was able to get that solution up and running and we got all the computers enrolled in it, I was a lot more at ease, But again, I think the biggest concern was, is everyone going to be able to do this on a day-to-day?
How much pressure were you feeling?
Quite a bit.
In this environment, you're it.
Yeah.
It's not like you have this huge staff. You're it. When decisions like this are made, what does Joe say? Right. What did anybody run that by Joe?
Yep.
What that feel like?
It was pretty overwhelming.
When you got 100 people the company's got to keep moving, right?
Right.
You got not your own, just your own company, but all the companies we're supporting.
Right.
And how'd you sleep at night, and how'd that feel?
Yeah, the last few weeks have been a bit of a whirlwind. It was very overwhelming. I'm not going to lie, it was pretty stressful, and there was quite a bit on our shoulders to ensure that, we got the solution up and running quickly and appropriately for our workers. Yeah. But again, I'm thankful to the team that I had, the leadership team and my team, to help roll this out.
You had a lot of support.
I did.
You had a lot of support.
I
think I want to briefly talk about, this isn't your only job.
No, it's not.
Yeah, so I think I want to make sure that the listeners understand this. This is not like you had to do that. You had full 8 hours, 12 hours, 16-hour days just to focus on this.
Right. This is one of the 3 divisions that I oversee at Concept.
Yeah, tell me a little about the other stuff that you still had to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the other divisions that I manage is our external CRM group. So they're solely responsible for our Salesforce. They manage our Salesforce partnership, our HubSpot partnership, Conga, and a few other solutions that we support for our customer base. So on that side of the business, it's really providing consultation services, implementations, ongoing support, and training to our customers. And then the second division that I oversee is our internal CRM group. They're solely responsible for the management of our own application of Salesforce and HubSpot, and they're responsible for the execution and project setup for all of our sales development or our lead generation customers, as well as the ongoing management of those projects. So we do the initial project setup, and we're constantly importing new data, making adjustments to their CRM to ensure the program's running successfully.
You got 3 full-time jobs.
I do.
You had to be going pretty crazy during this period.
Yeah,
you have revenue responsibility.
Correct.
P&L responsibility.
Yep. Yeah, it was, like I said, it was a bit of a whirlwind. I'm glad that things are starting to settle down now, and I'm able to get back to some normalcy and day to day. I'm very thankful for my other two divisions as well, being the external and internal CRM team, where they really picked up a lot of the slack, where I had to focus some of my time over here on IT for a period, and they kept things moving along.
You mentioned several times about kudos to your team and accolades to the staff. It's pretty important in times like this that you have a right-hand person.
Yes.
And you got people that you can delegate to.
Absolutely. I would say, I don't think I'd be able to manage the three divisions that I have if I didn't have the appropriate team in order to execute on their day-to-day responsibilities.
I think that's important. I think a lot of times we allow underperformers in our group, and then you get to a crunch time like that you just went through, and you can get bit.
Right.
Luckily, you had a staff that you were very comfortable with.
I certainly did.
And they rose to the occasion.
Absolutely.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
All right? I'm going to ask you two questions.
Yep.
Tell me one thing that you did that was very good, and tell me another thing that if you had to do it over, I would do this a little bit different.
Okay. That's a great question. So I was very, very pleased with the way we actually rolled this solution out to the group. I was very pleased with the processes that we put in place, taking some proactive measures to actually outline some of this. Everyone knew what their tasks were, how they were going to execute on it in the very short time frame that we had. So I was extremely proud of myself and the group and how we actually executed the rollout for this. Thinking back, if there was one thing that that we had to change or do over, it's really tough to say at this point. I guess to no fault of our own, having a little bit more time to
you just didn't.
Right, having a little bit more time to ensure that everything was completely set up properly. So I can tell you, when we rolled out Workspace ONE, we had the program set up and in place. We had the application installed on all of the individual computers. However, we weren't able to enroll the first group in time before they had to leave the office. So we had to go back and enroll them once they got home and got set up, which only took about an hour, hour and a half. I would say if we had a little bit more time to really, get all the bugs worked out and things like that prior to anyone leaving the office, that probably would have been a preference of mine. But again, we're up against a time crunch, and we didn't have much of a choice there.
Yeah. What would you share? I mean, right now, a lot of companies are at home, and there's still a lot of companies scurrying around, trying to get at home and running into complications. What would be some words of advice or things you could share with those kind of companies that are still working through this process? Anything you could offer? Yeah,
leverage technology to its fullest capacity. I mean, we were not shy to go and make an investment in that technology to ensure that we were able to manage a group of this size. If time is a luxury for you, I would certainly recommend for anyone who's trying to evaluate a work from home type of environment, set up a pilot group like we did. Take a look at all the pros and cons, see what productivity levels look like, see what, employees' work-life balances look like. I think those are all very important things to consider when rolling something like this out. But, just know that you have a lot of technology out there that can really help you with this. And we've never been shy to not leverage technology.
Well, I think that's kind of key.
Yeah.
There's a lot of technology out there, but if you're behind the times, not a good time to be behind the times right now.
Exactly.
And I think maybe some words of advice to some companies is, if you're in that situation right now, you really need to, obviously you got to get through this particular time, but you got to get on the technology bandwagon.
100%. 100%.
This kind of stuff's going to happen again. I'm not saying a particular virus, but you're going to need technology. You mentioned you were looking at this VMware back in January.
Right.
And the only reason you were doing that is because you were trying to be proactive.
Correct.
You saw a potential problem, was very small. It wasn't going to make or break our business, but you were being proactive. If you weren't, we could have been in a different situation.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Leverage and adopt technology. I mean, it's only there to help your business. Everything from CRM, even if you do have 365, there are so many different solutions within that platform that companies don't even touch, they don't ever use, they don't ever look at. And one of those being Microsoft Teams or Microsoft Streams or leveraging SharePoint or leveraging OneDrive. I mean, those are applications that are readily available to you. It takes a little bit to set up and configure, but once you have those pieces up and running in the event of a situation like this downstream, or you go to a remote workforce, you're set up and ready to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, hey, I want to thank you for coming. I know this is a very, very busy time for you.
Of course,
so
my
for
pleasure.
you coming in here and taking this time and this hour out of your day to do that. But I thought it was a pretty good topic to talk about right now. And you've obviously managed through it very well. And you got us in a good situation at Concept. So hats off to you.
I appreciate
hats off
it.
to your staff. We know the staff is very important. And hats off to technology.
Yes.
Right.
Without it, we couldn't have done any of this.
Yeah. And so, hey, thank you for coming in today. Thank you for all that you've done for Concept and getting us to where we are. We want to thank all of you for listening in. And if you have any questions for Joe, look him up. You can find him probably out on LinkedIn, I'm sure.
I am on
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
See him out on Concept's website, conceptltd.com. And I'm sure he'd be glad to help you in any way he can. Thanks for tuning in.